meeting will resume. No action was taken. Move on to approval of the agenda. I'd like to move item 15 to 5A. Otherwise, be the same. Are there any other additions, please?
No. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as corrected.
Motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Brent?
Sorry, was that your motion and Ken a second? Commissioner Scarf?
Aye.
Commissioner Stats?
Aye.
Commissioner Bell?
Aye.
Mayor Gears?
Aye. Move on to agenda item 5A, which is consider a resolution regarding 801 West Trap Street. Mr. Motti.
I think you guys are just authorizing me to touch base with the property owner and negotiate a resolution to this item. So at this point in time, I don't have much more than that other than I'll touch base with the property owner tomorrow and set up a meeting and see how we can come to a resolution to get this project finished. So
We need to make a motion for direction, Brad. All right. Any other questions or discussions?
Nope.
All right, move on to consent agenda.
I'll make the motion we consider the consent agenda as written.
Second. So motion and a second. Further discussion. Ms. Lorenz?
Commissioner Scarf?
Aye.
Commissioner Stats?
Aye.
Commissioner Bell?
Aye.
Mayor Gears?
Aye. Proclamations and announcements. City offices and non-essential operations will be closed on Friday, April 18th for the spring holiday for the city. Are there any other things that need to be aware of that? All right. Move on to receive a presentation and update from the Kansas Association of Trail Stewards.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Mike Scanlon. And I have a handout for tonight.
Thanks.
So, 3 years ago, I was here, and we were working on an MOU among 4 cities. It was Osawatomie, Ottawa, Council Grove, and Herington. I happened to be the city manager of Osawatomie at the time. And since that time, of the 4 city managers, you have 3 new ones. I retired, Brett's the replacement, Brian Silcott took Richard's place in Ottawa, Nick's still there in Council Grove, and Thatcher's new to Herington. And my presentation is really just 5 slides, sort of like the origin story, how did we get started? And it began with me talking to Richard in Ottawa, and I said, you know what, of all the things that we're working on, one of the things that 4 of us were working on at the time was a big raise grant for the Foothills Trail. So we were working with Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks, and we were pulling statistics and support letters. And I will tell you, when somebody says we're going to go get a $25 million grant, you kind of like roll your eyes. Sure you are. We'll help you out. Maybe we'll get it. Lo and behold, we did for the Flint Hills Trail, which then made the work of the 4 cities more important because we knew that we were going to get this big investment into the Flint Hills Trail over a 4 to 5 year period, and we needed to work on it. So it grew out of the pandemic and the money that was generated there. It was 4 cities that got together. By the way, the 4 cities are called the founders of Kansas Trail Inc., by the way. If you didn't know it, you were a founder. We then started working on, okay, how do we organize ourselves? How do we get studies? One of the things that you'll notice, not on your end, but on my end, and you'll see it progress, are trail counters, so that we could actually physically count who's on the trail and where they're at and what are the jump-off points for the Flint Hills Trail. As we're working on this, the Sunflower Foundation in Topeka received a grant from Mackenzie Scott, the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos, and they said, we would like to take a portion of it and invest it in the Kansas Association of Trail Towns. That's what we gave as our founding name. And then we became the Kansas Association of Trail Stewards. And on the founders board is Thatcher. So Thatcher represents all the founding cities on that founders board. And then we have people from throughout the state of Kansas that are on Kansas Trail. The one thing we've been able to keep the whole time is that rails to trail, and those would include the Flint Hills, the Prairie Spirit, the Landon, the Western Sky, and the Skylight Trails are all longer rail trail corridors, have been sort of at the forefront of what are we going to invest our time and money in. And so our origin story, I just sort of told you that. The next slide, if you flip over, you're going to see the reasons why trails are important. We use this a lot for like the RAISE grant. I'll also tell you that you will find a welcoming partner with the Kansas Department of Transportation. I was able to take the RAISE grant, what we were doing at the trailhead, and turn it into a $1.5 million transportation alternative grant that created trail loops, both on the street and then on the levees of Osawatomie to connect the Flint Hills trails. So there's even more dollars out there. Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks, they have a trail program that I want to say it's 90-10. So they'll give you 90% of money, and your 10% could be match of labor, whatever you want to contribute to it. It could be dollars, and we have two of those where we're building a mountain bike and a pump course for little kids off the levee loop. So you can start stacking these, and you don't have to use money to make your maps. So those become really beneficial. So it's about preserving and boosting local economies. Talking to Janet while you were in executive session, I said, you know, in Osawatomie when I got there, they said, like, why is this trail important? Well, all of a sudden in 2024, 3,500 people participated in 9 different events that were held. And then we had about, we believe, between 10 and 11,000 people that used the trailhead. So that's 15,000 people that showed up in Osawatomie to participate. And the only place to shop is Main Street and 6th to 5th. Otherwise, you're going to have to drive another 10 or 15 miles to find someplace. So trails can promote that local tourism. The next thing that I would tell you is this is what we've done in the last year. So right now, we're working on a website as well as a mapping website. We worked with the Kansas Trail Council that donated $25,000. And with the match that we got from Sunflower, we're able to build a map of all the trails in Kansas. When we say all the trails in Kansas, there are approximately 425 that go 4,365 miles. And I'm not including the county roads that you'll see in Unbrown, Gravel, and Emporia where they do gravel bike racing. And you're starting to get a gravel bike circuit in Kansas from northwest Kansas all the way to southeast Kansas. So there's 90,000 miles of public gravel roads that could be used as part of any type of gravel competition. Gravel bike racing, the fastest growing biking event in the world. What's funny is the Unbound in Emporia is considered the premier event in all of the world. So they will actually not have enough space for the people that want to participate. And when you sign up, you're in a lottery. And that lottery, 75% of the people will get in, 25% won't. So we believe that there's opportunity to leverage what Emporia's done and use it on like the Flint Hills Trail. The last thing that I would tell you, we have a really simple mission, and I know that Thatcher's aware of it. It's to help people find trails in Kansas, to build trails in Kansas, to support those trails and that investment that's made by the state of Kansas and the federal government, and then promote them, which is what Janet's job is. And I'm going to talk to her probably next week, saying like, hey, how would you like to participate in the world record? You might have heard of World Cup coming to Kansas City. So right now we have 2 cities that are participated. We'd like to get all the ones on the Flint Hills Trail, but it won't be totally completed, but we'd like to get Herington's participation. The goal is to set the longest record of passing a soccer ball along the Flint Hills Trail. Right now it's like 20 miles. Well, good news is Flint Hills Trail is much longer, and you have towns that are situated about, 9 to 6 miles apart, a little longer, but here between Council Grove and Herington. But getting that participation, which 1 brings awareness to the World Cup, and 2 brings awareness to Flint Hills Trail. The other thing that you haven't heard is that we received a letter from the Secretary of Missouri Parks and Recreation, and they've agreed to start working on a connection between the Katy Trail and the Flint Hills Trail, which would make it the longest contiguous trail in the middle of the United States. You have the Appalachian, and you have the Rocky Mountain one that runs from Canada all the way down to New Mexico. But this would be the longest one in the Midwest. So I'm just here to say thank you for being a founder, and thank Thatcher every 2 weeks on a Monday at 9 a.m. He has to be on a conference call that lasts either an hour or an hour and a half, and he's done that religiously now for 8 months. And he had a baby somewhere in there. But thank you for your support. Thank you, Janet, for giving me your card. And if you have any questions, I'm glad to answer them.
Questions?
Nope.
Well,
Thanks, sir. Appreciate you coming and giving the highlights.
Well,
Well, thank you.
I'm going to go eat.
We'll find you on Facebook and the website soon, or for Kansas Trails.
Yep. And I'll be sending you t-shirts. If they're signed.
T-shirts. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.
We'll move on to the discussion of the current status and draft of the capital improvement plan.
World records for capital improvement plan. Stuff I can follow. So, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, good evening. Lance Onstock, professional engineering consultants. So tonight, what kind of serves as a touch point for us, city staff and PEC, myself, and others at PEC included over the past 2.5 months have been working through kind of a preliminary approach to capital planning for the city of Herington over the next 10 years. So tonight, as you saw, I'm assuming you saw in your packet, there's kind of 3 different pieces of information we're going to touch on tonight. So preliminary project identification that we want to get your guys' feedback on, some revenue projections that we've done to see what it is that we have to fund some of these potential projects, and then we'll end it by kind of tying those 2 things together, looking at the revenues, looking at the expenditures, and seeing what we can do matching those 2 things together over the next 10 years. So, to kind of start, we'll look at those projects. So we primarily focus on potential roadway projects. So just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea of the inputs into some of these projects, and then we'll talk specifically about each one. But we were provided a condition assessment that the city completed of its roadway system in 2019. So we have reviewed that. That's definitely a piece of the input puzzle here. We've had conversations with your staff about what their priorities are, what they know about the systems as they exist today. And not just roadway projects, which we'll talk about and we'll see here in a second, but trying to identify those potential projects that kind of have a nexus together. So how can we accomplish the most by combining projects where possible? We've kind of looked at general traffic routes and traffic volumes. So as it pertains to your roadway network, where would we anticipate those investments going the furthest? We've obviously used your guys' comprehensive plan that was completed in 2024 as an input to these identified projects, in addition to the strategic plan that you guys completed in 2024. So all of those things kind of married with our subject matter expertise as planners and engineers really kind of factored into the identification of these projects. So again, kind of the magic behind capital planning is that we're linking physical infrastructure needs with our financial capabilities and being strategic about how we implement and make those improvements. So we'll start with the projects. Primarily, they're going to be roadway projects, but included in this preliminary list is Fifth Street improvements. So I know that there's a desire and there's a conversation about improving that intersection and then also improving Fifth Street back up to the north. So for Fifth Street, for each of these projects, we'll include our estimate, which you guys have line item estimates included within your packet. Again, using some of your recent bid results, I think from, I think it was an A Street improvement from 2023. So we used local unit prices as best as we could, and then again, kind of supplemented that with some recent work we've done throughout the state. So for this Fifth Street project, definitely some intersection improvements, some geometric improvements to that intersection, some surfacing improvements, and then a mill and overlay or surface treatments to Fifth Street, so from Trapp to Walnut. So that's about a $190,000 project. The next project is Broadway Street. So here, again, we're looking from Main Street to Vine Street with a mill and overlay. So this one is obviously one of the larger, bigger ticket items that's on the list. Next project is Commercial Drive. So we had some conversation with staff regarding Commercial Drive. You guys, I'm sure, will remember from your strategic plan and the comprehensive plan that making strategic improvements to infrastructure to hopefully kind of spur and encourage economic development was identified in both of those. So having some, doing some localized repairs to either the subgrade or the base, and then obviously some surfacing for Commercial Drive is something that we wanted to include for your guys' review or thoughts on. So the next project, Sturgis Street. Again, we've identified for a number of different reasons from its current condition and some of its compatibility with some of the other projects. But again, we're not really, there's going to be one kind of total reconstruction, or you'll see here in a second what we're calling total reconstruction, but it's kind of a partial reconstruction. Again, here we're looking at localized repairs to kind of keep that surface in good condition, but then replacing with a new surface as well. Walnut Street, this is the one where we've got some at the north side of Walnut as a total reconstruction. The reason why we're doing that here is because there's a water line underneath that north section that needs to be replaced. So if we don't want to come in and do a mill and overlay and not address that water line. So that's why you'll see where we've got total reconstruction on that north path, because we need to get at that water line. We could reconstruct the entire thing, but again, trying to be cost conscious here, it would look and feel like it was one project. We'd just be completely reconstructing that north side. And then lastly, we did want to include some allocation for D Street. The price that we have in here is for 1,000 feet of roadway. So obviously $88,000 isn't gonna pay for, isn't gonna be adequate to fund a mill and overlay for that entire stretch. But understanding that that particular roadway generates quite a bit of traffic, we want to make sure that it was represented over the next 10 years in some way. But a lot of that is going to be work planned annually by city staff. So all of those projects, those are as of now, the identified street projects that we've developed. We have had conversation with staff about, allocating some annual rehabilitation costs or funds for as those things come up that you need to address that maybe we're not thinking of at this time. And then having a funding source for when grants are available to you that you'll have to provide those matching requirements is also something we've talked about. You'll see that play out here in a second when we get into kind of some of the scenarios. And then there's a lot of conversation, obviously, within your strategic plan and with your comprehensive plan about your water and sewer utilities. I know there's other funding sources other than property taxes and potential sales taxes or existing sales taxes for those. But I do think at some point, whether it stays within kind of this framework or within other frameworks or funding frameworks within the city, in conversations with city staff, I think water and sewer and having a plan for that over the next 10 years is probably going to be something that we would recommend so that as a city we have a path forward identified. So we've included that. Again, just kind of as a placeholder, I think it's an appropriate place for it to be. but there are other funding mechanisms for that. So in total, we've identified approximately $1.7 million worth of projects that we think fit all of kind of those considerations that we mentioned at the beginning. So I'll kind of pause there before we get into some of the financial pieces. Any questions about any of these projects? Anything you're surprised that's not on it? Just really any feedback for us project-wise?
On Sturgis Street, why can't we just go all the way to Third?
We go back to that slide.
Yeah. You could.
I mean, if we're planning for the future anyway, that's one extra block that's half of a normal block.
Yeah, I think we talked about that.
I think you probably talked with Cody about this.
Okay.
Maybe, because I don't know if this one might be one that needs some utility repairs too.
Yeah, generally most of these do.
Yeah.
So we're trying to combine those, but we can definitely look into it.
I mean, that's,
Yeah, Orient's being on this exhibit here is Third. So the extension.
would be that last block.
Yeah, because that doesn't go,
Goes from Second to Third.
and there's that east-west, so I'm looking north of here, right?
You're looking west.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Is it unpaved?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think that's unpaved.
It's a gravel, unpaved road.
Yeah, so that's why we stopped it there, because we were just doing a surface, but if we wanted to put asphalt surfacing down on it, we could definitely include that. It's gonna not just be an extension of, a surface treatment, but we could definitely add that into it, or at least as an alternate.
I'd like to see what it would be as an alternate.
Sure.
On Walnut Street, when you do half the side, would it be feasible to get the water line done first and do it all at once? On Walnut?
We would do it all in one project. We just wouldn't rip out all the way down to the water line on the other side. Is that?
I think I'd want the water line replaced before you did anything.
Well, I think we just rip out half of it and the other half you travel on while the project was going.
Oh, so okay.
Yeah.
The water line runs on the north side of it, doesn't it?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, so it would be, you would experience that kind of as a phased, but it would all be one contract, one construction project. But we'd rip out half, replace the water line, build in a new base, and the lifts of asphalt. Then we'd mill off the other side, come back in with that final lift of asphalt on both sides.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
As far as the projects go for the roads, that was my only one, so I don't know, does anybody else have?
We need to get something done. That's it.
Yeah, and I mean, this is not tying you to a certain dollar amount for obviously any project. This is just, all right, we have an idea of what it's going to cost. How do we pay for it? That's what the CIP makes that connection for you that we've never so far been able to really make. Even the comprehensive plan, we identified it, but we really didn't put an exact dollar amount to it, and that's what we're trying to do, or at least an estimated dollar amount. So. And like with the A Street project, city staff did a lot of that demo work ourselves. So, I mean, that could affect some of the quotes that we've had, or that could affect, that could make some of these projects maybe a little cheaper if we were able to do some of that on our own in the future for some of these, particularly, the smaller projects. I think Broadway and Walnut are the ones you're probably just going to have to bite off and look at some long-term financing to get those projects done in the future. So,
I take it back. I have one more. There's no streets on the west side of town that we've identified. Is there any on the west side of town that can get a little attention? That's
I
right.
think you could do Walnut. I think you could account for a mill and overlay on Walnut. Other than that, there's a lot of projects even we haven't identified in here, like smaller projects, like, there's 2 or 3 sections on Vine that needs the same treatment as A Street, where you go in, rip out the utilities, and come back in and replace the road afterwards. But you know, we didn't want to get in too far into the CIP of, you know, doing some of that and replacing, you know, accounting for water line and stuff like that. We have other budget for that. I mean, we have budget right now to go into some of these sections and do similar to what we did on A Street. We have enough money to replace the water and sewer lines or whatever, but we don't have enough money to come back and give a proper mill and overlay. I mean, if you'll remember, A Street took us, like, we merged 2 years of a budget together and pulled money from every nook and cranny we could to get that thing done, just because it needed done so bad. So yeah, I think there's some stuff on the west side we could identify, but we really tried to focus on the major projects, and I don't know if there's as much of a major one on the west side, to my knowledge, but if there is, feel free to express that tonight, and we could consider adding it in. So
Go ahead.
South 7th, McLaren Street from 7th to 11th, Main Street, Wyatt Street, those are all gravel streets.
yeah, and I mean, we can get into the gravel stuff, but I mean, you know, I guess the argument against it is, you know, when we're struggling to afford to take care of the paved roads we have, to go in and pave new gravel, and then it's like, okay, we're going to put a mill and overlay on a gravel street. Well, if you don't add a curb and gutter to that, you're going to be looking at spider cracking and breaking off the edge in a couple years. So,
Which we've seen in some of the previous projects that are done, but at the same point, we're not showing anybody on the west side that we're looking at them either.
well, a lot of cities, if you want your road paved, you know, you get with your neighbors, you get 50% of the neighbors, and you special assess it to your property. And we could do that all over town. We could put together a program for that, but the fact of the matter is, you know, when we're thinking on a broader scale and trying to support the infrastructure we have, the idea of going into, you know, the dirt roads in town and trying to pave those is going to be quite an expensive undertaking. So, I mean, you can do that. You can choose to spend your money however you want, but
Bring back the chip and seal.
yeah, there's chip and seal options. And that's why
Better than
I asked
dust.
Lance to include some money for annual rehabilitation. I mean, the newer roads we have in town, we're not adequately taken care of. So it's important that, okay, we're going to spend the money to fix up these streets, but, you know, in 2 years they need a crack seal, and you know, 3 or 4 years they need a full top coat, and 5 years or 10 years they need you know, another full mill and overlay. I mean, we don't have a lot of money to go do new projects, and we don't take a lot of money to keep the existing projects or the recent projects up to date. So, I mean, this is $1.6 million, and this addresses, from, as far as I'm aware of, the comprehensive plan, the strategic planning we did. There was the roads that were identified in that, and then the general sentiment from the community. I mean, 90% of what I hear is, you know, Broadway and Walnut. So, and those are your two biggest money projects. So, the rest are, you know, obviously Commercial Drive. That's a big one too. And if you're going to try to attract new businesses, that's critically important. 5th Street is a lot of truck traffic we're getting from the railroad, and you know, I think if you're going to go in and do Walnut, you almost have to do 5th Street too, because while you're doing Walnut, 5th Street's going to get beat up even worse, or vice versa. So
I'm not discounting the projects that are identified here. I just think that we need to have something that says we are going to be encompassing more than just this. So even if it's a longer term down the road or whatnot, I would like to see something there.
Yeah, we can take a look at kind of all of the things we look at when looking for rehabilitation projects. I'd say, I mean, this conversation or this issue of gravel streets and how you handle those, I'm assuming these are residential or local streets that are gravel. Yeah, I mean, there's 100 different ways that cities attack those problems, I'd say, Thatcher's right. I'm not sure I've ever worked within a city or for a city that's ever 100% city at large funded gravel to a weathered surface local street, whether that's, a chip sealed surface or an asphalt mat, so asphalt or concrete without curb and gutter, or definitely not curb and gutter. I know there's 50-50 cost arrangements, there's 70, any sort of, relationship under the sun, but going from a gravel street to even an asphalt mat roadway section, is not a cheap project, right? To be engineered appropriately to prevent or minimize some of these issues that you guys have, those are fairly major projects, and I don't know how long or how many feet or miles these streets are, but we could definitely look for something that we think satisfies that, but that's also needed as well for West Street. And when we walk through kind of how these projects match with some of the revenue projections, maybe there's a place there to where we can start playing with, whatever that is. So we can definitely take that back, work with Thatcher and Cody, and work with your staff essentially and figure out what we can do.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so one of the, again, just to kind of bring experience that we have with other cities on similar projects, one of the main ways that we see roadway projects, rehabilitations, reconstructions, whatever it is, funded by is our local sales taxes, right? So you have utility fees, utility revenue, user fees that fund some of your other major, or should fund some of your other major infrastructure maintenance, your water and sewer lines and electrical, whatever utilities that you have, right? Streets are just one of those things that doesn't really have a very secure funding source for most cities. And, not only residents use our street systems, right? So we did go ahead and just do a couple sales tax projection revenues for that, as potential funding sources for some of these projects. So right now you guys have a 1% local sales tax that's in effect. You can see the 22, 23, 24 actual revenue numbers there. So 176, 172, and then 176 if you include both the sales tax and the compensating use tax. So you'll see a little bit of fluctuation there, a little bit of a decreased trend from 22 to 24, at least for the sales tax portion of that. The compensating use tax is a little bit more steady, and then you guys just had a banner year in 24 on compensating use tax. So we decided as part of this kind of preliminary step in projecting this revenue just to kind of maintain your guys' budgeted numbers for 25. I think going back, and I think we went back to 2020 maybe, to try to identify some trends. But again, I think this is something to be watching as we go forward, is to kind of try to identify what's maybe, that, reduction in 12,000 from 23 to 24 is. Is that something that we need to prepare for and project going forward? But for demonstration purposes, for preliminary purposes, we've maintained, if we maintain a 1% local sales tax, what is this going to generate over our next 10 years? So what we're showing here, and the 1% is a total revenue of $1.65 million. The next slide that is with a 2%. So essentially what you're going to be doing here, I mean, it doesn't take an engineer or rocket science to figure out the additional revenue from 1% to 2%. So assuming a number of things remain consistent, then projected revenue would increase to just under $3.6 million for use towards whatever capital projects you guys decided to use it for over the next 10 years. So we kind of have an idea of what our expenditures may look like through the identification of those projects. We have an idea of a couple different scenarios that we have in terms of available revenue. So again, the magic of capital planning is we're going to marry those things. So included in your packet, I know we don't have, it's kind of hard to put those on a slide. So our two tools one tool, two different versions of it. So what this is called is a multi-year fund overview. So essentially all this is is there's one for the 1% scenario and one for the 2% scenario. So all we're doing, and just to kind of orient you to that document itself, is on the left side, you'll have your starting balance. So again, we're not going to get super into the technical details, but if you look at that 1% scenario, that first column for 2023 actual, that's the amount of money in this particular fund that receives your existing sales tax that was available at the beginning of 2023. So that was $267,000. Then we account for the revenues for 2023. So we have a total revenue of $172,000 roughly. Then we program whatever projects we're going to fund out of this particular fund below it, and then we're lessing that number, right? So we're taking the amount of money we had in our account at the beginning of the year, adding what the new revenue for that year, subtracting out what we're spending that year, and that's going to get us our ending balance for that year. So just orienting you using 2023, we began the year with $267,000. We realized $172,000 in new revenue. We had $200,000 in expenditures, which that year, if we're just looking at that year, was a loss in that fund of $27,000. But we're still carrying over $240,000 because of that beginning balance, right? So when I look at this spreadsheet, this document itself, that $239,000 that we ended 2023 with is now going to be shown as beginning resources that are available beginning 2024. So that's how these multi-year fund overviews work, essentially. So I can plug in my revenues that you see from here into each one of these scenarios, and then start to plug in these expenditures, these projects, into whatever year I can, making sure that I don't ever end the year with a negative balance. So that's really what's driving kind of which year these projects are in both of these scenarios, is when do I have enough money, revenue generated, that I can pay for one of these identified projects. So you guys can, I mean, there's no real magic behind that, right, other than what I just said. You just don't want to end the year with a negative balance. You can't end the year with a negative balance. But shifting things around completely, what I would consider a legislative conversation, priority-based conversation. But I'll tell you that the two biggest differences that you'll see between the two scenarios is it'll take the full 10 years using a 1% sales tax to just do essentially the projects that we've identified. So if you'll look at kind of the 1% scenario, there's really nothing that's programmed or forecasted for annual maintenance budget or for grant matching funds until you get to year 2036. Because we're building up money, enough revenue to fund a $400,000 project. And then we might take a year or two off to build up more funds and do more projects that we've identified. Once we get through the identified projects, we could identify more projects, and we would, right? It's just not reflected on this. But here it's reflected as annual rehabilitation budget and or grant matching funds. So in the 1% scenario, it's largely going to take care of the identified projects over 10 years. The 2% scenario will take care of all of the projects we've talked about here tonight within the first 5 years. And then after that, what I'm showing as annual rehab budget is going to be applied to whatever projects you guys decide to at that point. But you'll be able to have, $400,000, between $300,000 and $400,000 a year, starting in 2032 as opposed to 2037. So that's really the summary of the difference between the two. If we just utilize the 1%, the existing 1%, or add 1%, whatever. If you have 1% of sales tax dedicated to capital improvement planning, you'll have 10 years to do, it'll take all 10 years to do the projects we've identified. If you do 2%, you get them done in 5 and move on to others. So that was a lot of information really quickly on multi-year fund overviews, as we call it, but fancy budgeting tools is all they really are. Fancy is probably too strong of a word, but, so, that information given, like, I'll pause again there to kind of get, questions, discussion, feedback.
That's a word we are adding a sales tax.
Well, if we're good to go with the CIP, it's my intent to get something together for the second meeting in May. As far as a vote, we have to at least notify the county 90 days before, you know, and so we can make a determination in May if we want to go ahead and vote on this to put it on the ballot in November, or, you know, if we're not quite ready yet, we could delay that to 2026. But I will tell you, if you got a sales tax passed this year, you wouldn't actually start to see revenue from that till about a year from now, probably. And so if you kicked it to 2026, you really wouldn't see any revenue till 2027. So it would just shift you back a year. But
Well, everybody knows that there's no way we can fund a street without finding some other money, property tax or whatever, but the sales tax is probably the fairest one that everybody uses. And I'd like to see us go forward with it as soon as we can.
I mean, that's kind of how we discussed funding the CIP. I mean, there's a number of different ways you could fund it. Some cities designate 15 or 20 mils a year just for capital street projects, but that's not always the easiest thing to do, particularly in a community like Herington where you know, property values are a touch lower than in some of your metro areas or your Kansas City areas. So a mill doesn't go quite as far, and you'd have to designate a lot more mills to get to the same point. So without drastically restructuring your existing budget, you know, this is the only way I can see to do it. And some of your current sales tax, even by ordinance, goes to supplement the general fund. So, you know, some of your sales tax currently is supporting, you know, your daily city operations in a number of different ways. My recommendation for this would be to designate the sales tax specifically for street and road projects, you know, and or to fund the CIP. And you could put whatever number to that you wanted. You could make it 75% just street and road projects and 25% to other CIP projects. You know, we don't really have many other projects in this particular CIP because streets and roads are our pretty much main priority. But, you know, you can always rework that CIP in the future, and maybe your sales tax revenue will be a lot higher in 5 or 6 years. Maybe it'll be pretty close to these projections. There's no exact way to know. There's no exact science to it. So
The 1% scenario, is that including the 1% that we already, or is that an additional 1%?
I think it depends on how you interpret that, right? But your question is valid. So, is that, and if you interpret that to mean only the 1% that you currently have, then that means the transfer, the support of the general fund is not happening in this scenario, right? So, if you want to maintain that general fund support of the existing 1% sales tax, then I would consider this an additional 1% in the 1% scenario.
So either way, we're working.
You're looking at 1%.
Either way, you're looking towards a vote for 1% or 2%.
So your current rate is 9.25% total?
9.5 if you're in Morris County, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, you could do it any way you wanted to do it. I mean, you could do a full 1%, which is probably what I'd recommend. You could do it on a permanent basis. You could make it a 10-year only sales tax to match the timeline of the CIP, and say, hey, we just want to fund these projects for the next 10 years, and then it'll sunset at the end of that period. I mean, you could do a 0.75%. You could do a 3/4. You know, that's really up to you guys. We just plugged in 1% for kind of simplicity, but there's currently no method to make that sales tax available other than making some substantial cuts to other parts of the budget. So,
I just say, I think we just put it out for vote and let's see what the people, I mean, that's the way we can pay for streets.
When it
Yeah.
comes to the commission will have to decide if it's a 1% or 2% that it goes to the vote.
Would it be just a 1% more? We
you would
already
just
have
be
1%.
considering adding
1%.
up to 1%. So,
If you went, okay.
We already have one.
We already have one.
we have two sales taxes that are 0.5% each.
Correct.
We have a 1980 and a 2006 sales tax. The 1980 is not designated. The 2006 is designated to street projects and to support the general fund.
Pool maintenance, but yeah.
Budget, whatever you want to, supplementing the budget, whatever you want to call it. So then we would be considering adding anything, up to a full another 1%.
So yeah, my comment is correct. Commission's gonna have to decide. That vote's gonna either be 1% or 2%. Not just one more percent.
Well, just
Yeah,
one more.
I think it's a determination, a decision, a conversation you guys have to have.
He had a 3% scenario too, and
Yeah, so total of 3%. So you can have a maximum of 3% local sales tax in Kansas. Two of those can be a general sales tax, so non-identified support, right? Just because, for lack of a better term. If you want to go to 3, at least 1% of that has to be special, like it has to be reserved for something. So you guys currently have what I'd consider 1% general sales tax. That's currently being, from what I can tell, and you guys will know more about this, is just really being transferred into the general fund for use as a general fund revenue source, right? So if you wanted to continue supporting your general fund with the existing 1%, then if you want to fund all of these projects within 5 years and have money, then yes, you'll be asking for an additional 2%.
you have to weigh like what you think will be successful in the community, and there's a number of different ways to do that. We did have a 2010 sales tax at Sunset that I believe was 0.5%. So the sales tax has been higher before. Obviously that sunset and it went down a little bit, but yeah, that's a balancing act the commission has to do. I would recommend going to the ballot on probably a 1% sales tax. That would be our highest individual sales tax that we would have. So, and you'd have 2%, I guess, total if that were to pass. So, and
I don't think we would have a complete 2% with the way that resolution on that sales tax is. So that would have to be something that we have to double check. Because that sales tax specifically says pool maintenance and street projects.
These are street projects
Yeah.
that we're proposing.
Right.
So
But what I'm saying is if we're only going 0.5% up to another 1, what he's saying. So there's lots of things that we need to have the hard number on. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm fine either way at the moment, just because I'm not sure how much I'm willing to spend more in sales tax, knowing
Do you have any other ways to fund the
I
streets?
don't, except for exactly what was mentioned earlier, using state statute and telling 50% of the residents on a block if they want to sign a letter, we'll go ahead and do it, but we'll charge their specials. That's the only other option.
well, I mean, you really can't do that with like a Broadway street. I don't know.
It'll work. It would work. That would be the option. I mean, but it's not an option. I'm willing to look at 50% of people on each block to sign a letter.
Yeah, and there's, special assessment statute, right, is what we're talking about. There's two methods of utilizing special assessments for funding projects, right? One is a petition signed by a majority of benefiting property owners. There's always the option of city-initiated special assessments as well, which, I'll see myself out real quickly if I say it again out loud, but the city always does have the ability to publish notice and have a hearing and make improvements that way. I, in my 15 years of working for cities and actually in cities, I've never experienced it, but it is statutorily allowed to do so. Now, granted, there's, you know, reprieve on the benefiting property owner side as well. So there's, you know, we see cities fund road projects in a number of different ways. There's special assessments, there's sales tax, there's obviously property tax, there's intergovernmental funding, which you guys already received through the gas tax and, you know, city connecting link and all of those things, right? There's impact fees on new development. All of them have a trade-off, unfortunately. So it just depends on what trade-off is acceptable for that particular municipality. But, you know, the options for funding these is not, you know, there's not dozens of them.
I mean, the logic behind sales tax, and particularly a sales tax that is maybe on a 10-year time frame, is you're, and specifically for street and road projects, if that's what you want to make it for, is you're guaranteeing that money is going to be spent to rehabilitate street and road projects, if that's what you designate in here to take to a vote by ordinance. So there's no shifting the money around. There's no, oh, we'll use this money for something else or whatever. It's for street and road projects. And even with, you know, with as frequent as that's not something that can change with commissions or staff members or community members or anything else. That's pretty much set in stone for the 10-year period. Whereas, you know, if you're just saying, well, we'll fund these projects through our budget a different way, it's hard to guarantee that funding to be there when you've got a different commission every year, every other year, voting on a new budget. It's hard to really carve out or designate a certain amount of mills each year. I mean, you have to be really diligent. So that's the thought of going to the community, saying we don't have, there's really not another way to pay for these projects other than a sales tax, so that I'm aware of. So you know, we'll obviously have that conversation on a different night. This is just to tell us, okay, here's the projects, here's the numbers, this is what it's going to take. As a community, as a commission, as a staff, we all want these roads done. How do we get there? This is the way to get there. And outside of this, I don't have many solutions at this point in time. So.
It's a big puzzle, is all it is, right? So finding a comfortability in terms of revenue generation, and you know, there's always difficult decisions to make when allocating scarce resources, right? So you know, if there's projects on here, it's like, man, you know, I'd love to do commercial drive, but I'd rather, you know, save $370,000 and apply to another project, or even be more comfortable and able to expedite the other 4 or 5 projects. You know, so that's it's really you know, a thought experiment and a projection experiment, where it's like, where can you get to a situation where you have the ability to make individualized decisions like this and then plan going forward, but every single year, in my experience, you will be revising this 10-year outlook, because things change over 10 years. As much as I don't like it as a planner, right? Like, the world doesn't stop just because we've got a plan in 2025. So we can finagle this, play with it, massage it as much as we want to. We can go back and kind of look at, you know, extending the Sturgis Street to Third, or Sturgis to Third. We can look at the west side. We can play with maybe the 1.5%, using the existing 0.5% and adding 1%, and then maintaining 0.5% as general fund support. There's a number of different scenarios we can go through. We'll get with Thatcher following this. Any other feedback from you guys, we'll get with Thatcher and see what we can figure out in the next couple weeks.
Sounds good.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you.
Of course.
Appreciate it. Let's move on to discussion on update on the current status of the wastewater treatment facility.
Alrighty. Well, I've got
Jason's
Jason
here.
if you want to come up, Jason, in case I got any questions for you. But essentially, we've lost both our blowers at the wastewater treatment facility, and that's pretty much the heart of the operation to a certain extent. Keeps your water moving in the basins, keeps the good bacteria and microorganisms going that are going to support your wastewater treatment. So they're old units. They were built in the 1980s. We're aware that they're old. We've known that for a long time. I think they were fully rebuilt 2 years ago, and then they both had the bearings fully redone last year, and one went down, and then the other one went down shortly after. So long story short, we do have a temporary setup that's keeping us going that are basically commercial grade air compressors that are keeping our operation running, but those run off diesel fuel and are pretty much running 24/7. So we're rapidly trying to find a solution as quick as we can. So we do have a quote for new blowers, which we'll talk about on the next agenda item, that would both work with our current setup and with our incoming, with the full project, which Todd's here tonight and may give a little bit of an update on where we're at with the project. As far as the phase 2 sewer plant reconstruction, we're still making progress on that. We're trying to sort through financing at this time, and I know there's been a few issues at KEHE with financing, but luckily we reached out to Kansas Commerce on the opportunity for an urgent needs grant. We've pretty much been assured that we will get the grant if we apply. They can't obviously guarantee anything, but we've pretty much been told, yes, we think this qualifies as urgent needs. Start going through the process to apply for the grant. They don't pay for anything that is not a long-term solution, so they view the purchase of 2 new blowers as a long-term solution to the urgent needs category of CDBG. So we've got the application together for that. You'll notice a little later on we've scheduled a public hearing for that. That's a requirement of really any CDBG application, but particularly this one. So we scheduled that for next Wednesday, which was as soon as we could at 5 o'clock. And then after we have that public hearing, 15 days after, we can actually turn the grant in. There's about a 5-week lead time on the order, so we're working it out with Commerce to ensure that we can get those ordered, but they don't reimburse anything that happens before the grant, so we're going to try to go ahead and place those on order, and hoping that we can pay for the 2 blowers at the end, and then ultimately be reimbursed by Kansas Commerce on that. So this has all come together in the last 2 weeks, basically. So 2.5 weeks when we've lost everything. We sent the old blowers off. I don't think we've got a full answer on if they could even be rebuilt, but our position is it's not really worth investing any more into those. And I think with the urgent needs grant, hopefully we'll cover most of our costs. They can't reimburse us for any of the daily operations that we're doing now, so we're going to be still out of pocket for trying to keep this thing running on a day-to-day basis and the equipment rental that's involved in that. So our best solution at this point that we've identified is just to get these blowers on order as fast as possible. So with that being said, we've got Jason here, who thanks to him and Cliff have kept this thing running and helped us steer away from a crisis for the time being, but this is quite an emergency, and the state has recognized that, and I think Todd with SMH, our engineers, recognize that. So if you've got any questions for them.
Basically, you don't have a choice.
Yeah, we really don't have a choice, and I mean, I think we can go ahead and...
Where you have funded and out of?
So I would fund it temporarily from the electric reserve fund, and you might think, well, it's not electric, why are you doing that? But that's really your only other, rainy day fund. That's the fund that we, basically use as our general fund, because our general fund is not really healthy enough to temporarily even fund a project of this nature, but, you know, I think you have a little over 2 million in your electric reserve fund at this point in time. You know, some of that's obligated that hasn't been spent yet, so you need to be somewhat mindful, but, you know, assuming everything goes right with the grant, and we think it will, you know, we should be reimbursed for that entire amount, so.
And you can put it back into the electric fund?
Yes, you could basically take that reimbursement check when we get it and put it straight back into the electric reserve fund if you wanted to, so.
Yeah.
That's, you know, you could probably get away with pulling a little bit out of your sewer fund, but particularly with the operations, we're trying to keep things going right now, and we haven't had our new sewer rates in effect long enough to really see a lot of the increased revenue from that, so you're basically just pulling it from a temporary spot. But either way, I mean, even if we were operating on the assumption that we weren't getting the grant, you pretty much have to do this, and the sooner we can get these on order, the better off we are. So, you know, I'm just going to be asking that we authorize the initial release of funds for the purchase of 2 new blowers from Herington. I don't know if that's how you say that. To be placed on order after notification of the grant award, or when we receive notification that we're good to go from Kansas Commerce, and then the funds would be initiated from the electric reserve fund and reimbursed at a later date.
We'll get to that agenda item in a second. Can we get a current update of where we are on the wastewater treatment plant as far as the next phase and whatnot?
What was the timeline for the repairs on that? If we were to try and repair it, and cost versus
On
that?
the old ones?
Yeah.
I haven't even heard back, not even sure if they're gonna be repairable. Still waiting to hear back. But we tore some piping, me and Cliff tore some piping apart, and there's pieces everywhere, so I'm gonna say the old ones, they're done for.
Okay.
I mean, something blew up internal in them.
Where are we on the current phase of the wastewater treatment plant?
Currently, we're in the process of wrapping up, trying to find our solidify our funding source. When we started this marathon project a couple of years ago, thought process, if you recall, we were gonna go after a CDBG grant. There was a big pool of money there that had been for years under the CDBG program. That program, that very year, was dismantled. They completely did away with it. The thought process back then was that if we wait another year, that would reenact that program. They did not. We decided to proceed because we have to. Just situations that Cliff and Jason have encountered. So we're in the process of wrapping up the loan application right now. It's through the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, KDHE, revolving loan fund. We're trying to finalize that loan application. We came across this urgent need grant that we're going after right now, and we should get $90,000+ of grant money, so that those blowers would be a part of the slated next round of improvements. So these blowers will just stay in place and marry nicely with the next phase of improvements to the plant. That's why we selected these blowers, and they were already identified as ones we would need for the next round of upgrades. Our time frame would be to finalize, hopefully wrap up the design of the improvements by the end of June. That's the time frame that we're setting, with the idea that the plans would go for review at KDHE. Usually takes them 2 to 4 weeks. So July, approximately the end of July, they'd be done. We'd advertise for bids then in August, and hopefully open bids in September-ish right now. That's kind of a 10,000-foot view. If you want some more, details, I'd be glad to, try to answer those questions. But I don't know if that answers what you're after right now.
That did, because I wasn't sure exactly where in the process these blowers sat, if it was for the next phase or this coming one.
It's not a Band-Aid fix, if you will. It is these blowers, the blowers we need for the next phase. So let's get them now if we can get
So
them.
they'll be in a
free, if you will.
they'll be in a temporary location with the current setup, but as soon as we implement the new setup, they'll move to their permanent home, but they will be the same blowers we use. And then we'll have 2 more blowers that we'll be buying in the project for a separate basin that are also going to be the identical brand. So we'll be able to work and have parts in order for all 4 of them at a time. So, and KDHE's had a few hiccups lately on some of their financing stuff.
It's in a tremendous state of flux and has been for the last couple of years. A little bit more on that, Patrick. Thanks for bringing that up. Their loan program, the one we're going after, a couple of years ago when we started this process, we were placed on the intended use plan. They've always had it, as long as I've been doing this, had an intended use plan. We were on that. Now with all the shakeups they've had and reorganizations and different pools and money coming from every which way, they had to redo basically everything. So we had to reapply, which we have done, to be put on the intended use plan. We just filled that out with here in the last 3 or 4 weeks and got that off so we can get back on the intended use plan. What that essentially means is that the state, KDHE, recognizes that, you know, these improvements Herington needs. We're going to earmark our estimated costs out of our pool of money for Herington. You intend to use X amount of dollars of that fund. And then again, we're trying to wrap up the loan application, and that has to be done by mid-May.
Well, that answers my question. Any other questions regarding the current status of the plant? All right. Now we move on to the next agenda item, authorize initial funds release.
So I'm pretty well confident that we're going to receive this grant. I mean, there's no reason to think that Commerce would go back on their word. I've spoken with, the representative in charge of kind of the urgent needs program directly. They've basically already said this qualifies. The only thing is just getting authorization from them and checking with the who we're buying the product from on what the payment schedule is. So I would say we'll probably try to get through our public hearing next Wednesday and then touch base with the company to see about what the timeline is for order. It's approximately 5 weeks. And then just staying in frequent communication with Commerce on making sure we order those, but we try to avoid paying for them ahead of time. But, I also think when you order them, if you cancel that order, there could be a small fee to repair that. So basically, I'm saying that we kind of need to buy these things either way. I'm very confident on the grant, but there's a number of different scenarios where everything just needs to fall in place and be conscious of time. But the temporary setup is costing us a substantial amount of money. So even more than 2 months on this temporary setup could be pretty cost prohibitive. So I'm just going to recommend we go ahead and release the funds for this, and then I can basically place the order whenever the time is necessary. So whether that's a week or, really Commerce goes ahead and gives us the green light after we've submitted the application or whenever that is. But it's my intention to get those on order hopefully by the end of the month at the very latest. So, we really want to operate as soon as possible, but I think we really need to get through our public hearing next week and see where we're at. So,
Questions, action?
I make a motion that we authorize the additional funds release up to $82,830,000 to purchase 2 broken motors from Azar, and authorize your signature, the mayor's signature.
Motion. I'll make the second. Motion and a second for discussion. Ms. Lorenz, can you call the roll?
Commissioner Scarp?
No.
Commissioner Stepp?
Aye.
Commissioner Bell?
Aye.
Mayor Garrett?
Aye. All right. Schedule a special meeting for a public hearing. Is everybody going to be available next Wednesday at 5 o'clock? question. I mean, I can be.
So that was just literally the first day we could with the, then there's a 15-day period that kicks in after the hearing. So I just did it as soon as we could. And that would be a special meeting to begin at 5 p.m. and then a public hearing at 5 p.m. or soon thereafter. So the publication will be out in the paper tomorrow. So long as everything goes fine with that publication, I will let you guys know, and we can just attend to go ahead and have that special meeting next Wednesday. So
Do we know if Cynthia's available on Wednesdays?
Cynthia is available. She did confirm with me that she's available for that. So I'll personally be at a conference, but I'm able to phone in if I need to. Should be pretty short meeting. It's just CDBG requirements. So
Need a motion on it?
Brad, do we need a motion?
I make a motion that we schedule a special meeting and public hearing for CDBG emergency grant application for 23 April 2025 at 1700.
I'll second it.
5 p.m. Sorry.
A motion and a second for further discussion. Ms. Lorenz?
Commissioner Scarf?
Aye.
Commissioner Stab?
Aye.
Commissioner Bell?
Right.
Mayor Garris?
Aye. Let us know if the problems with the publication goes back to maybe we need that resolution to let the city's website be the official. Brad?
yeah. Well, we've confirmed, so it should be in there tomorrow. So.
Okay. Next agenda items: consider proposal for low to moderate income survey.
So we had a discussion at this at last meeting or 2 meetings ago. Garrett Nordstrom with Governmental Assistance Services kind of explained to us, why we're kind of hamstrung for applying for CDBG grants. The previous CDBG grant is an urgent needs grant, so they waived the LMI requirements for those grants. But basically, the gamut of the other CDBG projects we can't really apply for. So, we went out, saw what we had to do. Garrett's really worked with us from the start on trying to find a solution to this, provided an option, and went ahead and got, I think, temporary approval or whatever, approval from the state to do a sample survey, which would cost us, it's going to cost us roughly half. So that's where he, gets to that 15,600 figure. I believe that's a little bit higher than what, he maybe said last time, but I know he said it was going to be at least over 12,000. So this gets it done relatively quickly in 45 days. We could consider during budget season identifying a project, whether that be park bathrooms or an infrastructure project or street and roads or whatever we want to do. We could potentially have a project together this summer and go ahead and apply, and then start putting it on the regular cycle. So, I think if we want to do CDBG applications and get into a habit as a community of turning in applications every year and going after that money, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, with the grant we're hopeful to receive with the sewer plan or anything else that we've done when we've, invested in working with professional organizations, I think it'll ultimately pay off. And I think this will pay itself off, hopefully 5 or 10 times over on the first grant, depending on how big you want to go. But it's up to $650,000. So, we've already worked with local community members, and there's the possibility to, pair other grants with CDBG in the future for the match portion or whatever the case may be. But I know it's a sticker shock and a big investment from the start, but this organization is prepared to execute this survey in a very short amount of time. And basically, the second they receive the check, they are going to begin the survey. So and be done in approximately 45 days or less. So
I'll make a motion to propose the low LMI survey through the Government Assistance Services amount of $15,600 paid by the Capital Improvement Fund and authorize the mayor's signature.
I'll second the motion. How much is in the capital improvement fund?
I believe last I checked was 60,000, but I think we're set to receive a distribution in there still. I don't know if we've received the full distribution.
I would have to look, but I think you're about right on the 60.
So you have a little bit in there designated to the CIP, and then
Is there any other questions or discussion on the motion?
That was my question. How are we paying for it?
And what was the sample size going to be for this?
To the
See, our Department of Commerce will probably have to make that determination. That's my understanding. It's not in the agreement.
I know it was approximately 300 homes. Let me see if I can. I'd have to get an exact number out of him, but I know it's like a third of however many doors we have, essentially. So
I think from my notes it was like 12,000 for 200 houses is what he was saying last time.
yeah, I mean that was a rough number he provided to us.
I'm wondering what's 16,000 for?
Well, I mean he didn't really commit himself to a number. He said it would be at least 12,000 is what I remember. And this is a little bit higher than that, I'm aware, but you know, I think he just got in there and calculated it, and I can get the exact figures on that if that's what we need. So
I'd just like to know what we're paying for.
yeah, I know. I mean, you're paying for exactly what would qualify us according to the state. He's worked directly with Kansas Commerce on this, so whether it's 250 or 300 doors or homes or whatever you want to call it, you know, so long as we fall within the category, the 51%, I mean, there's no 1,000% guarantee on that. I mean, there's no really way to guarantee that other than going to door on this sample size, but you know, he's gotten direct approval from Commerce to do the sample survey, because if we weren't allowed to do that, Commerce would tell us, you know, explicitly, you have to do the full survey or nothing at all. So he's gotten permission to do the sample survey, and it will be based on the total number of homes in the community or doors. So I can get an answer on that. I will follow up and email that out to the commission.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion on the motion? Ms. Lorenz?
Commissioner Scarf?
No?
Commissioner Stepp?
Aye.
Commissioner Bell?
Aye.
Mayor Garris?
Aye. Consider safe routes to school agreement between the City of Herington and Kansas Department of Transportation.
So we're still moving along in our process. We received proposals and made a recommendation on our selected engineer who's going to be managing the project to the Kansas Department of Transportation. So this is the initial agreement to get us going. Basically, after this, the engineer, now that he's been selected or they've been selected, are going to go start to do the actual design work. So everything before this was just general maps, so kind of a proposal. They'll go in and do the specific design work and the engineering everywhere to examine where specifically exactly the sidewalk is going to go, what right-of-way will need to be acquired, and that'll all start to take place this summer. And then hopefully we will begin the search or the right-of-way acquisition process this fall. So this fall to winter, and then still looking at a bid letting of early spring 2026. I think by March is the deadline. So still moving along very well in the project. Still the only cost to us will be right-of-way acquisition costs, and we're on track. So there may be another agreement once the engineer has sorted everything out with KDOT that we'll be bringing to you again maybe in the next month or two. So this just kind of gets us going.
This basically makes the Secretary of the Department of Transportation as the city's agent to move forward and not spend more than $1,136,075. Anything above that would be the city's cost. So.
Or we would have to look at trimming the project down.
The city would have to have the cost of all right-of-ways and utility adjustments. So. Are they pretty confident they can do the whole sidewalk program for that $1.1 million?
Yes, I think so. And I mean, I think if it comes in at $2 million, you have the opportunity to decline too, right? If we get ridiculous bids, so that's why we're working with the engineer we're working with, so he can put a really good proposal together. And they're the experts. They're one of the biggest firms in the country, so they're going to typically do a pretty good job of playing that guessing game. So.
Do we have any action or any other discussion?
I'll make a motion we consider safe route to school agreement between the City of Herington and the Kansas Department of Transportation and authorize the mayor's signature.
Second.
A motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Ms. Lorenz?
Commissioner Scarp?
Aye.
Commissioner Stacks?
Aye.
Commissioner Bell?
Aye.
Mayor Garris?
Aye. All right. City manager comments.
So staff have been getting out and getting started on mowing this week. We're pretty well caught up, so we're just going to ensure that everything's mowed and looking good ahead of the holiday weekend. Another reminder, city offices are closed Friday. Reminder for you guys, I'll be out Wednesday at a Kansas Association of City Management Conference next Wednesday through Friday. We'll be checking email and available by phone, and be available to call in for the special meeting if necessary, but Megan will be there to operate that. New construction on new homes at Logan Point is finally complete, other than any landscaping that's going to be done. So we encourage folks to go take a look at that or spread the word if you know of somebody interested. I mean, they're a pretty good value if you look at the cost of new home builds with the supplementation from the state. So they're priced for anyone to buy them. Anybody can go in and get a heck of a deal. They're pretty much priced at cost. So encourage folks to go take a look at those. We had some sand delivered at the lake. It's in a big pile right now. We'll be spreading that out soon, and then we're still looking at options on the net, or whatever you want to call it, for the swim pond. I don't know if we'll have a permanent solution for that this year. I think those things can get pretty expensive, but we'll start looking at options and working on other preparation at the lake as it warms up. Still starting to work down at the pool and getting it ready for the summer, preparing for some minor renovations to the locker rooms down there. We're also getting bids for the masonry or stonework at the pool, both the pool house and Tripp Field. Both of those need some preventative maintenance that hasn't happened in quite a long time. Summer help application is still open. Encourage folks to continue to apply for that for the next week or two. We're probably going to close it. Hoping to hire at least 2. Might be able to get up to 3 on that. So, yeah. So we're just recommending 18 and up. We haven't had a lot of applications under 18, but I think the liability these days with
To
under 18
operate their
is,
equipment, they can't ride the mowers.
yeah, yeah. It's just gotten so difficult. So, you know, if 18 and up, that's really what we're considering, and that's most of the applicants we've had. We've had applicants in all age ranges. So even if you know somebody that's retired and wants a little bit of extra work, you know, they can set kind of their minimum hours or maximum hours or whatever they want to do. So we still have those applications open up for the
No
for the time
comment.
being. It's going to be mostly
You're
mowing.
a city commissioner.
Does that mean I'm your boss if that happens? No.
That means he's actually off the commission if that happens.
We've got budget sheets out to staff. They're working on getting those together. Auditors will be here the first week of May, and then we'll start building out the budget and hopefully target an initial budget workshop for late May or early June to get us started on budget season this year. So with that, that's all we've got for now. So.
Commissioner Scarf?
No comments.
Commissioner Stats?
I brought up a few months ago, I had a veteran who was talking about the flags at Sunset Hill Cemetery, that the poles evidently needed some issues, or had some issues. And I really don't know what I'm talking about, other than they noticed that either some of the poles didn't have probes or flag poles weren't in good shape. And just kind of putting that out there. Memorial Day is coming up, and I'd like to see them all copacetic. And, you know, of course, I'll volunteer if you got some issues that needs some lay person's hands to go and work on them. I'll do it.
I will say, just for accountability, that we've tried to maintain since I've been here. And I know people like to tell commissioners about it, but if you can really encourage folks, hey, call City Hall, submit a work order on that. That way it's in the system, and you know, we're trying to be diligent, and particularly with Cody in his new role, he's being diligent about checking those work orders. So encourage folks to do that. I'll send a note to Cody personally on that, but it's our goal to prioritize the cemetery, particularly around the holidays this year. So
Thank you.
Anything else? Commissioner Bell? I do, and I'm going to state that before I read this, it's an individual statement. It is not a statement of the commission. It is my own individual statement. Megan, I will get you a clean copy. So bear with me as I read this. By now, many are likely aware the commission voted 4-1 on April 1st, 2025 to purchase the Herington Hospital building and the surrounding real estate from Emprise Bank at the cost not to exceed $150,000. The city manager was directed to execute related agreements on that action, which will also indemnify the city of Herington of any costs associated and requiring a complete and free title to the building and its property without any other encumbrances, liens, or obligations. The source of that funding does not come from current or future property tax collections. It will not be passed on to the community to be recouped under any bond provision or special fees. It comes solely from the municipal revenues of the city for the services that it provides. It is an unfortunate circumstance, but one made in the best interest of the community by a majority of the commission to control the fate of the property under our own terms and not under the terms that would be decided by some unknown person or entity. What is the downfall if the city didn't act as it did? The building and the surrounding real estate would have gone to auction. The city could potentially, and maybe won, but there's no guarantee that it would for what it did, nor is there a guarantee that whoever would have won that auction would act in the best interest of the city either. They could come in, would have complete control of the situation. It could then be gutted, made into another vacant and unsafe facility that further deteriorates in a time the city would still have to take the action on the property because of the failure to maintain safe upkeep. What can the city do once once it has its free and clear title to the property. Several options exist once it is fully complete. Could it become a new municipal facility and house several entities in a one-stop facility? Sure it can. Could portions be rented out to interested people and entities who maybe want to try and open a kitchen or have a small office space available? Yes, it could. Could it be turned around and sold to an interested developer that will utilize the property for their own purposes, such as a residential development or another form of a development? Yes. Could the real estate be subdivided out and sold as separate parcels for further development? Yes. Does the city now control the fate of the entire property once that free and clear title is completed? Absolutely it will. I have received a multitude of different reactions that the action of the commission took. Some believe that it was a good move for the city to control the fate of that property, and some frankly are not in agreement with that. I can respect both sides of those opinions. The collective decision of the commission is not always going to make everybody happy. There will always be disagreement in some form, and that's perfectly fine. Ultimately, the hospital closed its doors without warning and leaving the community in a perilous situation. Now we are picking up the pieces from those broken decisions. I believe that the community had suffered a loss of a hospital that is immeasurable. However, in its absence, we have received 2 functional health care clinics downtown. We have maintained our hometown pharmacy. Dental care continues, and soon the city will see a physical therapy center return as well. Emergency medical services continue to operate effectively and efficiently to provide care needed in the moments it's needed. I remain hopeful that the Rural Health Group are able to continue and push forward with the proposal to bring a rural emergency hospital back to Herington, something we can hope to see come to fruition soon, but know that there are many steps still to be taken. Rather than focusing on past negatives, why don't we look to the future and the positives that could happen? If you still want to disagree with the actions of the commission, do so. That is your absolute right to do. But I do ask that you be willing to listen to the resulting conversation and be open to disagreement. We collectively, as a majority, control the narrative of the future, not the actions of the past. Megan, I'll make sure you have a clean copy of that. And just as another update, and I will provide it from the Rural Health Care Group, they are continuing with their funding options, and they are optimistic that they will be able to continue. So we will continue to hear more news on that as they move forward. So, absent anything else?
We adjourn.
Motion and a second. Ms. Lorenz.
Commissioner Scarp?
Aye.
Commissioner Stats? Commissioner Bell? Mayor Garrett?
Aye. Thank you.